sometimes after you finish, a story, whether it's like a TV show or a book that you've been like heavily invested in, you finish it and you're like, I guess that's the end. And then you're kind of in like a haze.
Is that what you've been with Stranger Things as well?
Yeah, it's been a combination of 2025 being over, Stranger Things being over, and the Iliad being over. And I'm in this like daze where I'm like, there's like a hole in me and I need to fill it with
content.
Like something. I need to fill it with like the Odyssey and like something else,
Hello, and welcome to Winnow, a couple's close reading of the Iliad and the Odyssey. I'm Owen Gemmer.
I'm Isabella Gemmer. We are married, and we love to talk about books together.
In this podcast, we are working our way book by book through the entirety of Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. This particular episode will cover book 24 of the Iliad, the very last one.
Yes, this is the last time I'm ever going to talk about the Iliad. If it comes up in conversation with friends in the future, I'm just going to say that I'm not...
Go listen to our podcast.
I'm no longer discussing this topic. No comment.
No, surely when we start the Odyssey, we will harken back to these conversations.
Only when we absolutely have to.
I will say I've also been very excited for this. Again, I think at the beginning of this project, if you had asked me to list like the 5 books that I'm most excited to talk about, this definitely would have been near the top of that list. My sophomore year of college at St. John's, our Greek class used book 24 of the Iliad as our sort of focal point for our study of Greek and also circumstantially of the Iliad. So I have spent many, many, many hours talking about this book with my peers and translating pretty big sections of it. So I'm really excited to hear your thoughts on it because we haven't talked about it, obviously. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah.
Let's get to our summaries first.
Yes.
You want to go first?
Sure, I'll start. Achilles' grief becomes blasphemy. The gods know he's not acting rationally. Priam goes to the tent, on suppliant knee he is bent, and appeals to filial piety.
Filial piety is good.
Yeah, even though it's technically Latin in its roots. Mm-hmm. But
rhyming couplets. Kind of. Hector's body needs to be put to rest. The gods argue about how to do it best. Hermes guides Priam to Achilles' tent. Priam tells Achilles that he was sent to bring back Hector's body. They cry and each lament somebody. Priam makes it back to Troy unseen. Hector's funeral takes place as the women convene.
The book starts with Achilles in extreme grief. So we had talked in the last episode about the funeral games where there seems to be a little bit of an uptick in the mood where Achilles is kind of like in charge. He's being generous. He's helping solve problems. But that did not fully solve everything because he is quite pitiful here at the beginning, and angry and sad and all the big emotions all at the same time, still centered around the death of Patroclus.
Mm-hmm. So he continues to periodically hook up Hector's body to the chariot and ride around the Greek camp, which is crazy, insane behavior. But it should be noted that the gods who sort of take pity on Hector have enchanted his body so that it's not rotting or being affected in any way. So he looks, even though things are bad, at least he looks nice and fresh.
Yeah, this is the section I want to read. Harkening back to this sophomore language class, I found a document where I had apparently been keeping track of all the sections that we translated. I'm not going to read, obviously, the whole thing because it's actually very funny if you read through the document, which I did this morning just to see. You can tell that at the beginning of the semester, I was really trying to make it like a more poetic translation. Mm-hmm. And then it just got lazier as I went. It was just like kind of more word for word, just as literal as I could be, just getting through it. But the first part is, I think, pretty good, in my own humble opinion. I'm not publishing this. I'm not claiming to be like a great translator, but, I read it and I was like, oh yeah, I was cooking. So this is the beginning of book 24, translated by Owen Gemmer. The assembly was released. Each man to his swift ship was scattered. They planned dinner and sweet sleep to please, but Achilles, he weeps, having remembered the love of his friend. All subduing sleep grasped not him. He turned here and there, turning and yearning for the manhood and excellent might of his dear Patroclus. And as many things he carried through, and suffered pain, piercing the dangerous waves, the wars of men. Remembering these, he shed flowing tears. Once on a side, another supine, another prone, then standing beside himself in grief, he turned from the shore of the beach. But when he yoked swift horses up, he tied Hector behind the chariot to be dragged. Thrice he dragged him around the tomb of Menoetius' dead son. Then again he stopped at the hut. He'd leave Hector stretched in the dirt. Apollo, though, taking pity on him, even though dead, protected all his flesh from mutilation. He hid all under golden aegis, so that dragging Hector about, Achilles might not lacerate him.
Whoa. So poetry.
It's I mean, it's not the best. I could do better. But
yeah. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
How old? Yeah, you were like what? 20 years old?
Yeah.
Little baby Owens?
Yeah. I think what stands out to me is the sort of restlessness of Achilles' grief. We have seen Achilles obviously be very stationary for most of this. He's been just kind of sitting at his boat for almost the entirety of the Iliad. Then he gets back into action and he's fighting. And then when he sort of finally accomplishes his goal in fighting to kill Hector, that doesn't calm him down. He is right. He's not sleeping. He's tossing and turning. He's on his back, on his side, standing up, dragging the body around. And so there's still so much sort of energy and motion to his sadness. I think, different people obviously react to grief differently. Some people do kind of shut down and just kind of go into a more sort of stasis or hibernation when they're sad. They just like can't move. It's more of a depression. But he is very much not behaving in that way, but his sadness and his grief is very kind of active and emotive in all these different ways, which I think is fitting with his character, right? Like he had been hot-headed at the beginning and then sort of became icy in his sort of anger. And then when that iciness was sort of like destroyed by Patroclus's death, then all of that sort of like emotion had been sort of pent up and just has still sort of come bursting forth.
It's like he's sort of trapped in a cycle that he can't get out of. Like this cycle of, I'm going to try to go to sleep. I can't. I'm going to go drag Hector's body 3 more times around the camp. Okay, back. I can't sleep. I'm going to go drag. He's like trapped in this repetitive loop. And that's why it seems like he needs outside intervention, right? So then we transition to the gods looking down on this scene and being like, we should really stop this. Not just because it's terrible to do this to Hector's body, but because like this is like not normal behavior, it's we need to, someone needs to step in and break the cycle.
Right, because if you remember, most of the gods' involvement, especially coming from Zeus, has been to bring glory to Achilles, right? Like they had been intervening in such a way that Achilles would get great glory, and what's happening is not very glorious. And so they're like, oh, Achilles is not sort of, being himself. And doing the things that he should be doing. Rather, he is dishonoring Hector, and so thereby kind of dishonoring himself.
Yeah. He's not winning any glory points right now, either from the gods' perspective or, definitely not the Trojans' perspective, and definitely like I get the sense that like his own men are probably like, okay, this is a little much.
So the gods concoct this plan where they send messengers so they send Achilles' mom to Achilles.
To Achilles.
She basically says like, hey, Priam's going to come offer you a ransom for Hector's body. Just accept it and give his body back. Like, stop.
Yeah. And then they send Iris to Priam to tell him to load up your wagon with goods and go get Hector's body, which for Priam is like a big deal because he's an old guy and he is being told to just like on faith sort of just ride into the Greeks' camp.
Yeah, and it's kind of said to do so alone and not like with your army or anything. And so he's being asked to put himself in an incredibly vulnerable situation. And one thing I do find interesting is that it actually notes that Priam kind of susses out that this is a god who is telling him this, and the narration is actually very explicit that he wouldn't have believed it if this was just coming from one of his augurs, like one of his own priests who's like, oh, I have divined from the signs that you should go do this. He was like, I wouldn't have done that. But because a god herself came to tell him this, he's like, okay, I'll do this.
Yeah.
As the gods are sort of concocting this plan, one of the points that they make in their sort of council is that this plan will work because Achilles is... Do you want to read the section?
Yeah. Achilles will not kill him, nor allow anyone else to come inside. You see, he is not mindless, heedless, or ungodly. He will be kind and spare a suppliant.
Yeah. So this will be a kind of 3-part Greek time.
Yeah.
Because there are 3 interesting adjectives all used to describe what Achilles is not.
But it's so kind of, it's sort of like a 180 from, like throughout this whole book, I would kind of describe Achilles as mindless, heedless, and ungodly.
Right.
And they're saying, in this scenario, he will not be as we've expected him.
Right. Yeah. So again, these adjectives all get translated different ways in different translations. So the first one that Wilson does as mindless and Lattimore does as witless is the adjective ophron, which is the alpha privative, which is the negation, and then phron, which is related to the word for brain or mind. So it's literally like without a mind, mindless, senseless. So I think, mindless, witless, senseless, all of those are good things, like not thinking.
Yeah.
Because it does seem like Achilles has been pretty mindless. He hasn't been thinking super rationally. He's been thinking very emotionally for a lot of this. And so if they're confident that Achilles will not be mindless, it's kind of like, what gives you that confidence? Yeah. So the next one that Emily Wilson translates as heedless and Lattimore translates as unwatchful is oskopos, which again has another alpha privative negation, and then skopos, scope. So it's more of vision thing. So it's literally like without sight, but then kind of means inconsiderate or sort of like not aware, unaware, or things like that. Which again is another thing that I think Achilles so far has been pretty unaware. Like he has been just kind of sitting in his tent, not watching the whole war on a literal level, and then also not really caring what happens to other people, right? Like he's let a bunch of people die in battle knowing he could be out there helping them, and he just like hasn't cared. So to me, that's pretty heedless.
Yeah, and again, in contrast too, when like multiple people went to his tent and like gave really great arguments about why he should fight with them, he literally did not listen to them.
Right. He was inconsiderate of their arguments.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the final one of these 3 adjectives is Wilson translates as ungodly and Lattimore translates as wicked, is alitainon, which the dictionaries I looked at, the first definition is actually kind of like sinful or transgressing, which in basically every dictionary I looked had very clear religious connotations. But I will note this is a different word than the New Testament uses for sin in the Bible. So this isn't like, it's not the same concept, but we like translate it as sin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So apparently the gods know that Achilles has done a 180. He's a new man.
Or he will be a new man if Priam does all of these things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So that's what we get to, right? Like Priam goes on, it's a really long section of the book where Priam is just like preparing and walking to the tent and Hermes comes and helps him. I don't think there's that much interesting or noteworthy that happens really until they get to Achilles' tent. Are you happy skipping, or do you have anything you want to add about the journey to the tent?
It's just kind of like, it's kind of fun. It's like, it's another thing that happens by night, right? So in contrast to the night raid that Achilles and Diomedes go on at night, this is kind of an inverse where it's just Priam and, Hermes in disguise, and they go quietly.
I mean, in many ways, it's a parallel to the night raid. Is that?
Yeah, it kind of,
right.
Kind of
It's
is.
the same thing. It's like a few people sneaking into the enemy's camp in the middle of night, but the reason for it is completely different. It's rather than to kill, it's to sort of bring bodies back.
Yeah. And it's kind of cool how Hermes is like, all the guards at the gate, he like puts them into a slumber. They sleep.
These are not the droids you're looking for.
Yeah, he's doing that kind of stuff. And then once they get to Achilles' hut, it describes like how the way it's built and like how the latch on the door takes 3 grown men to lift it so that you can get inside. But Achilles can do it all on his own. But Hermes lifts the latch for Priam so that he can enter. Just like things like that. It's just like they're cool little notes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he gets in there.
And immediately, Priam's first action is to supplicate himself at the feet of Achilles and to kiss his hand. And he makes a very big deal in his then later, like the first act, he doesn't speak, he just goes and he kisses Achilles' hand. Mm-hmm. And then later he's talking about, how significant it is that he is willing to kiss the hand that killed his son.
Yes.
And he sort of uses this as a really symbolic and powerful moment of his humility and willingness to supplicate himself in this way. As they end up conversing and Priam is sort of making his supplication, the biggest sort of facet of his argument, which is why in my summary I talked about appealing to filial piety, is Priam basically says, like, imagine your father, Peleus, mourning over you, want your body to be with him.
Yeah.
Now I am in that same situation with Hector. A father needs to be able to mourn his son. And so think of your father when you think of me.
Yeah. And again, it's interesting because that argument hasn't worked in the past when Phoenix kind of, when Phoenix uses the argument of like, listen to me, I kind of raised you as my son. I am sort of a father to you. Do it for me. And Achilles is like, no, I have a real father.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's interesting that it actually moves him and it actually works.
Yeah. And so I think it's also important to talk about the way it moves him, because throughout this entire sequence, there are many, many mentions of Achilles and Priam weeping together. There's a lot of crying that happens. And there's even a point sort of at the end of the crying before Achilles then goes and like basically gets Hector's body, where it's very clear that like they have had their fill of weeping, or they have been satisfied with weeping.
Yeah.
And a couple books ago, we talked about this idea of like what will satisfy Achilles, where when he first is sort of enraged at Patroclus's death, he will not eat, right? He has not been eating. And then he wants to kill. So he will not be satisfied with food. He thinks he'll be satisfied with fighting. And so he goes on the big rampage that we talked about. He kills Hector, but he then finds out that he was not satisfied by simply killing Hector. But here, their weeping is satisfactory. It is very clear that the common tears that they share about fatherhood and sonship and love, it is satisfactory. It does sort of bring an end to that sort of the rage, essentially.
Yeah, they cry until they are satisfied with weeping. Priam sobbed desperately for murderous Hector. Achilles wept, at times for his own father and sometimes for Patroclus. So their wailing suffused the house. But when godlike Achilles had had his fill of tears and his desire to weep had left his body and his mind, he jumped up from his chair with his hand, lifted the old man to his feet. They kind of look at each other and they have mutual respect for one another. And it's kind of obvious why Priam would respect Achilles, because he's like the strongest. He has like all of the regular symbols of status in this society, right? He is the strongest and he has the most power, he's just the most powerful. But it seems like Achilles has respect for Priam because like Priam has been through a lot. Achilles tells Priam, "Your heart is surely made of iron. Come sit on a chair and let us hide our grief inside ourselves, despite our bitter sorrow." But that, like, surely your heart is made of iron. Like, that's a pretty cool compliment. Yeah, like, I think Achilles sees Priam as someone who's actually, like, really endured something.
Yeah.
And many things. Achilles talks about like, there are like the gods, like there are two cups, one can be filled with good things, one can be filled with bad things. Do you remember that?
Yeah, and he's basically like Zeus. There's kind of the memes of like, God combining different things in people. And it's basically that like God can give good fortune, Zeus can give good fortune and ill fortune to people. And he mixes them together and he's like, you have been given a lot of ill fortune. Like,
yeah. Or I think that he sees them as similar in how like Priam did have like a peak. He like peaked. He had like 80 sons or something.
Yeah.
80 children or whatever. And then, like, all of those sons have been taken from him, and or almost all. And Hector, being the best of all of them, has been taken. And so, he's had really high highs. Priam has had really high highs in his life, and now he's at a really low low. And Achilles is also someone who has the high highs and the low lows.
Yeah.
And so I think that, like, they at least can recognize that in each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think one question that I had for myself as I was reading this is, do I like gain some respect for Achilles back because of this? Like, does he seem to have a genuine change of heart? When I was going back and reading some of like an essay that I had written when I translated this in my sophomore year of college, I was kind of appalled at how compassionate I was towards Achilles in that essay, because when I read it this time, I was kind of like, fake news, like, my gut reaction this time around, where I do feel like on the whole, I've been more negative towards Achilles, is that like, so all it took was you thinking about the fact that somebody's a father. Like, you couldn't have done that before this whole time. Like, it feels a little flimsy to just be like, oh yeah, this guy is also a father. Let me completely 180 on myself. Like, I don't know. It seems to be a sign to me of Achilles' fickleness rather than of some sort of like steadfast, genuine change in him. But I go back and forth because there are, right, like you were just articulating, there are a lot of reasons for them to feel this close connection with one another that is like a real sense of sort of compassion.
I think there's more going on there than just Achilles being like, oh, you're a dad and I killed your son, and I'm a son and I have a dad. Whoa, that's mind-blowing. I think that's maybe a little bit, but I think there is a sense of like, there's a deeper level of mutual admiration and respect that they're finding between each other.
Yeah.
Knowing how much these guys value status, like their own status, I think that they wouldn't have a moment like this between each other if they thought, like, if one thought the other one was like below him. Like there is a hierarchy. A hierarchy to the way that all this functions. And these guys wouldn't have a conversation like this or reach an understanding if they thought that the other one was below them. Yeah.
But here's another question. This is just me being, I think, cynical. Would they have had this conversation if the gods hadn't set it up? Because again, that's another reason where I was like, okay, yeah, like Achilles gives the body back because literally like his mom, like a goddess, came to him and said like, Priam's going to come and you should give the body back.
It does seem like this cycle would not have broken if the gods had not intervened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do think, another important factor, right, for me in terms of being more compassionate to this being like a real, genuine moment is, right, the way that he does give the body back and the whole interaction. Because Achilles obviously could have just like been like, yeah, take it, go, get out of here. I don't want to see you. But the fact that they do weep together, they do share these things, that I think it's also important that Achilles like prepares a meal for Priam, because Priam has also been fasting in his grief.
Yeah, so they feast together, and then Achilles gets Hector's body and places it on a bier. And then he has his men like take all the gold off of Priam's. He accepts the he doesn't say like, oh no, I have enough gold or anything like that. He's like, yeah, I'll take your gold.
He accepts the ransom.
Yeah. He takes the goods, and then they put Hector's body like onto the cart.
The wagon.
The wagon. Yeah. And then you want to talk about how like Priam gets sleepy because he's an old guy who's been grieving, and then he's just eaten a lot of food. And so he gets sleepy, which is understandable. I get sleepy like this too. And
when you're sad and have eaten a lot.
When you're sad and you haven't eaten anything, and then you are not so sad and you get your full stomach, like you get really sleepy. Like this is relatable. And so he asks Achilles if he can just like nap, which is like crazy to fall asleep in the middle of the camp of your enemies.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a lot. And Achilles is like, yeah, we're good.
Let me go get blankets for you and prepare
He sets
bed.
up like a sleeping area like outside of the hut, still protected, but like outside. And yeah, and then Priam falls asleep, but then Hermes has to come wake him up and be like, this is stupid. We got to go before the sun gets up. Get in the cart. Get in the car. We're going.
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy stuff. Oh, should we also talk about how Priam asks for a certain, like 12 days, a certain amount of time to mourn and bury Hector's body?
Yeah.
And Achilles agrees to not fight for that period to not, get the troops and wage war for that period of time so that they can have a proper funeral.
Yeah. Yeah. I also like there's a very subtle moment at the end where Priam is sort of going through like the process. We'll do this many days for this and the whole, funeral grieving process. And then he says, and on the 12th day, we can fight if we must. And he like puts that in like, if we must, it's like, or we could just stop fighting, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. But like, if we must, then I guess on day 12, we can fight again.
Yeah. I wonder what is it? Yeah. We will fight again if that must be. Old King Priam, this will happen as you request. I will hold back the war as long as you have asked.
So they do return to Troy, and all of the women and the other Trojans are there, lamenting. And it's a sort of interesting combination of joy upon the return of Hector's body, but also obviously the lamenting of he is dead, and now like the sort of formal, wake, grieving process, funeral traditions can all begin. Well, Andromache, his wife, again has an extreme reaction. She's holding their son and is basically like, well, I'm dead and our son is dead. Because as soon as the Trojans kill us, there's no way I'm going to survive. And it seems like she has kind of given up hope that the Trojans can win the war now that Hector is dead. And so she's also preparing for her and her son's death.
Yeah. Andromache sings in mourning, Hecuba, and then Helen herself says some words of parting, sad words. Yeah, it's so perplexing that in the final moments of the Iliad, it shifts. We leave Achilles behind, and it shifts, and it ends on
Yeah, you want to read the last line?
Hector's burial.
The last line is strange.
Well, the last few lines.
Yeah.
After the mound was built, they went back home. They came together for a glorious banquet inside divine King Priam's house. And so they held the funeral for Horse Lord Hector.
Yeah, so Hector is the last image, which is strange because, Achilles was the first and the rage was the thing that this book was about. But I think it actually makes sense, right, with that framework of this book is not about the Trojan War. This book is not about Achilles' prowess in battle or his fighting. This book is about Achilles' rage. And the rage begins with the argument with Agamemnon, and it ends when Hector is properly put to rest.
I think this is a good transition to talk about maybe like our final ending thoughts of the Iliad.
I agree.
Like overarching themes that we've seen and like overarching messages of the whole text. And something that has really, I was reading part of the introductory text for Emily Wilson's translation, part of her thick intro. And she was talking about like the whole code of honor thing, which it emphasized for me how much these wars are, historically, they were actually about individuals of power trying to get more power. And the way that the war is like set up such that like like that's the system. That's the way the war is set up. It's all about these like codes of honor, but not codes of honor in like a chivalrous way that we kind of like, this is in a very pre-Christian way. It highlighted for me how Achilles and Hector are foils for one another. And how, so each one of them struggles with balancing the good of the group with the glory for the self. The book starts with Achilles being like, you know what? I'm not a team player anymore.
Yeah.
I am going to hold out for my own personal glory, right? That's why he's not fighting, is he's, and he's waiting for the moment that like he will finally get what's owed him.
And he actually knows that that will be detrimental to the group. And he kind
Yes.
of like actually wants that. He's like, I want the Greeks to suffer
Yes.
because of my absence. Yeah.
Yeah. And Hector also, so while he is, you could say like he's more of a team player, I think back to the conversation between him and Andromache in the beginning of
book
the
6.
book 6, when she's like, you know, you can still fight, but you can just fight from the, you know, from the walls, or you can fight in the middle of the group. And he's like, no, I'm going to fight. Like, I'm going to work for the good of the group, but I am still also out for my own personal glory. Like, I am going to run out in front of everybody and be like the fiercest challenger that I can be. And so, yeah, I think like both Achilles and Hector, they're usually, like it seems throughout the story, like it escalates and escalates as both of them are striving more and more for their own individual glory.
Yeah.
And doing less and less for the group. And yeah, I wonder about what type of message that was for the Greeks of the time. Like, because they didn't have the same sort of Judeo-Christian notions of like self-sacrifice.
Or even the same like political notions of like a country, like fighting for your country or things like that. Like even that political system was super different, the way they understood themselves, right? Like Odysseus is, you know, king of Ithaca, and Achilles is the head of the Myrmidons and those kinds of things. So yeah.
In the Emily Wilson introduction, she mentions that it was like joining in on the war would have been like a thing you had to do, like as one of these little kingdoms. It would have been something that you would have to participate in. Either you would like send one of your sons to participate, or you had to pay taxes instead of sending men and like all this stuff. Like, it seems there's more historical stuff that like, you know, would probably add to my understanding of the text. But like, yeah, there's a lot of, there potentially is more political things happening in the text than even I'm aware of.
But I do think one thing that I really like about the Iliad is it is simultaneously grand, but also personal. Like, I think it does a fantastic job of zooming in and out. Like, there are times when you're thinking about the grand scope of the whole war from the gods' perspective. And then there are times when you're focusing on like really individual emotions and reactions and thought processes and things like that. And I think that, yeah, like I think all good literature does both and has things to say about both, and uses the small to reflect the big and has the big sort of in tandem with the small. And so to me, I don't think the sort of in-depth sort of understanding of the political situation would change that much, because I do think that the focus on these characters as we meet them and the containment of the myth as it exists in here, like it is self-contained. I think you don't really have to know that much about either Greek mythology or, you know, the political situation at the time to appreciate the sort of human emotion of this. And I think that's one of the reasons why these books have, you know, stayed popular for 2,000 years, is that like the world they lived in is so vastly different from ours in basically every way. And yet we feel for these characters. And yeah,
I wish I could give people the confidence that like you can read the Iliad. And by that, I mean, you don't have to be a scholar. Like, you don't have to be someone who studied it for years and years to read it once and get something out of it.
Yeah.
You can be someone who studies it for years and years. There are people who have studied the Iliad way more than even we have.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that they have things to say. You can't just be someone who likes to read, or even someone who reads anybody. Like, do you know what I mean? My pitch would be that, like, anyone can read the Iliad.
Yeah.
You know, anyone can cook, you know, that kind of thing. Especially when you read a translation that you are understanding, right? You pick the translation that, like, you're actually going to read, which is a big thing I've been thinking about lately. And you believe that, like, there is something in there for you to get out of it without being a scholar who studied it for years and years.
I think really you can just come in blind to Greek mythology and things are, I think, explained well enough to be able to get the gist. I think, like, knowing more of the backstory behind the gods and, you know, other tangential myths is helpful, but it's not necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that people also can sometimes worry that, like, if they read something that people have, like, really intense opinions about, that, like, they're going to read it and come away with, like, the wrong opinion, you know? Like, I mean, something that I think about often with the Iliad is, like, is this an anti-war? We've talked about it every once in a while. Like, is this a war is bad message coming from the text? Or is this, like, a war is kind of cool sometimes text? You know what I mean? Like, and I'm not sure exactly where I fall on that one.
I think the fact that this book is still being read and talked about many thousands of years after it was written is a testament to, like, these questions. Like, they don't have easy answers because people are still talking about them. It's not, like, settled where, like, every single person agrees this, because in many ways when books or questions are that obvious, they kind of fade in history because it's like, well, we all obviously know that this is the case, and so we don't need to talk about it anymore.
Yeah.
So the very fact that it's still being talked about is a sign that, like, your opinions do matter because we haven't, you know, settled.
Even though people have discussed this for years and years and years, that doesn't mean, like, there is still value in, like, you as a particular individual, like, coming up with your own thing to say about it. Or even if you read a text, this happens to me often where I read a text and I'm like, wait, I get it. And I will then say to you what is widely known to be the main idea of the text that people have been saying for ages. And I'll be like, I finally get it. And I think there is value in, like, the particular individual having an epiphany. Even though for thousands of years, other people have already said, like, yeah, we know that. Having those, like, particular epiphanies are still very valuable.
Yeah, I think originality is super overrated. That, like, the idea that, like, your opinion is only valuable if it is, like, new and saying something that's never been said before. Like, that's, like, so hard to do and is, like, so much of what I think can make academia feel like it's being gatekept in the ivory tower, where, like, oh, we have to discern all the past knowledge. But, like, no, like, your encounter with these ideas and the emotions that you have and the thoughts that you have, like, right, even if it's not original, it still is valuable. Again, like, I'm a high school English teacher. Like, I've read many, many, many essays about many classic texts that, like, say kind of the same thing as each other and the same thing that people have been saying about these texts for thousands of years. But, like, I don't require students to write essays because I want to read something new. I require students to write essays because the process of, like, writing and exploring these texts helps you uncover something about yourself, about the world, about human relationships that is valuable in and of itself and helps you become a better person, even if, again, thousands of people have said the same thing.
Yeah. Perhaps the way that you in particular have come to this realization about a text, maybe someone's had it before, but maybe you in particular can word it in such a way that it helps maybe someone else understand it, or it connects to, like, it connects to you in such a personal way that it helps you, like, order your own mind. That's something that I come back to over and again, is, like, how classic texts and articulating, you know, classical literature, like it can help order your own mind and your own thinking. And that in itself is valuable.
Yeah.
All that to say that the Iliad is done and we're going to move into the Odyssey. But we wanted to do a little extra segment where we talk about the things that happen between the Iliad and the Odyssey.
Which, again, given what we just talked about, is not crucial to know. Like, the Odyssey, again, is self-contained. And what is complicated about mythology is there's a lot of different sources, and especially old mythology. Many of them are lost. And so, many of the events that take place, what is canon and what is not is kind of always up for debate. I even made the mistake in our video about the first Odyssey movie trailer, making the claim that I was very confident in that Achilles dies during the sack of Troy. And somebody in the comments, asked me for my source. And I went back and realized my source was the movie Troy that was made in 2004 that has that. But the actual events of how, when, why Achilles dies, there is almost no scholarly consensus on these stories because, again, many of these stories were told orally, and so they weren't written down, or they were written down and then lost to time or the fire at the Library of Alexandria or these sorts of things. And so very often, many of these sort of snippets, we only have references to in texts that were written hundreds of years, sometimes thousands of years later, summarizing past stories.
Yeah.
Or we have fragments of little clips or not clips, snippets of these things. So yeah, there's 4 different versions of the story of Achilles' death. And, none of them are super conclusive as to this is the original one. And I think that mythology, and I don't even think we need an original one. I think maybe the desire to create a canon is a modern invention and a need to know this is the right version of the story. Let's go then quickly through some of these bullet points. And we're going to focus more on sort of plot points that are somewhat relevant to the Odyssey. So we do know that Achilles is dead by the time the Odyssey begins. Again, the exact circumstances of his death aren't settled, and again, I don't think matter that much. But Achilles is dead when the Odyssey starts. He dies in the course of the Trojan War, which is part of the prophecy. We also know that Achilles' son eventually joined the war efforts. Neoptolemus was his name. Again, there's versions of how he was born, who his mother is, and things like this. But most understandings have Neoptolemus joining the war effort and participating in the sack of Troy.
Yeah.
Then we also know the Trojan horse happened. And this is obviously in the Odyssey trailer for the Christopher Nolan movie. It's there.
It is mentioned in passing in the Odyssey.
Yeah, in reflection, I'll remember when that happened.
Remember when I did the Trojan horse thing? That was crazy. It's kind of like that. The actual recounting of the events in the present moment, Where's that?
Yeah, but again, if you're not familiar, you probably are though, right? The idea is that the Greeks needed to come up with a way to basically breach the walls of Troy, and Odysseus had the idea to create a giant wooden horse that they would all hide inside, and then they would present to the Trojans as an offering or sacrifice, and they would accept it because we're giving them a gift, and it's the divine pious thing to do to accept this gift.
Yeah.
Little did they know, inside the Greeks were all quiet and huddling, and then in the middle of the night they all burst out, and then they were inside the walls, so they could go open the gates, let the others in, and then kill a bunch of people. And this was, I mentioned the important part, this was Odysseus's idea. He wasn't the only one, obviously, to execute it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that sort of brings about the end of Troy. And actually, it's interesting. I was doing a little bit of research on where we get most of that story. So there was sort of the epic cycle of stories about the Trojan War, but most of those, apart from the Iliad and the Odyssey, were lost. So the actual written source that we have most of the Trojan horse from is actually the Aeneid, because the Aeneid starts with the sacking of Troy and follows Aeneas as he escapes. He doesn't die. And then he sort of travels with his, whoever he could escape with, and they eventually go and found Rome. And so it's kind of the Rome origin story in mythology. But that's actually where we get the closest and most detailed account in things that are still existing of the Trojan horse.
Yeah.
The other relevant plot piece of things that happen, right? All the Greeks, after they win, they all go home their separate ways. And, they all get home at various times because they have different journeys, and some of them face some delays along the way. But the most relevant one to the Odyssey, besides Odysseus's own journey home, is the journey home of Agamemnon.
Yes. We know all about Agamemnon from the Oresteia.
Yeah. Again, this is mentioned in the Odyssey.
Yeah.
But the most sort of detailed account of this is Aeschylus's series of 3 tragedies. Agamemnon is the name of the first one. The Libation Bearers is the second. And then the Eumenides is the third.
I mean, the quick summary is that Agamemnon gets home and his wife Clytemnestra has many grievances with him.
The primary of which is that in order to get to Troy, he offered their daughter as a human sacrifice to appease the wind gods, to allow them favorable wind to get to Troy in the first place. And so for 10 years, she's been stewing that he sacrificed their daughter. So she plots his murder and actually enacts his murder. She kills him when he gets home through trickery. And she has a new, Buthang, Aegisthus. Aegisthus also has a grudge against Agamemnon because apparently Aegisthus's father, whose name I think was Thersites, was tricked into eating human beings, his own family members, by Agamemnon's father, Atreus. And so there's family beef between Aegisthus and Agamemnon. So Aegisthus and Clytemnestra team up. They plot the murder of Agamemnon. But then one of Agamemnon's sons, Orestes, hears about this. He's mad. He's like, my mom just killed my dad. I can't stand for that. So he comes back home. He plots some tricks with his sister, sneaks back in, and kills his own mom.
Which is why it's called the Oresteia.
Yeah, because it's Orestes.
Because Orestes is the only one left alive.
Yeah, and then Orestes is chased by the Furies, the Eumenides, for basically accusing him of matricide, killing your mother. It's that's the worst offense you can do is to kill your own parent. But he claims no, my duty to avenge my father, is more important than my duty to not kill my mother. And eventually Athena comes down and is like, we're going to settle this the proper way. And she basically institutes a jury to hear out both sides. The Furies being he should die because he killed his mom. And Orestes being no, I was getting revenge from my dad. And people hold this as the beginning of the modern judicial system of a judge, Athena, and then a jury of your peers who vote. And so, the Oresteia is held as the beginning of the, democratic criminal justice system. Basically, again, long story short, Agamemnon is killed as soon as he gets home, and that becomes relevant for Odysseus and others in the Odyssey. Yeah,
it becomes relevant, not too much in the plot, but it becomes relevant thematically.
Yes. Again, there are other myths and versions of these stories that happen, and if you know more than us, great. If we're missing something, let us know. But again, it's not that important. I think the Odyssey gives you everything you need to know in the moment. It doesn't depend on any pre-knowledge. So if you have not read the Iliad, don't feel like you have to read it before you read the Odyssey. You can completely just go in blind to the Odyssey and be totally fine reading it.
Yeah. But if someone listening has made it this far, they've probably read the Iliad.
That's true.
Or they really like listening to people talk about the Iliad.
Yes. And if you are one of those people, we're very grateful. I will say that our kind of viewership and subscribers numbers have increased faster than we thought they would, which has been just fantastic. Probably when we're recording this, have we hit 500 subscribers as we're recording this?
Almost.
So probably by the time you're watching this, we hopefully will have hit 500 subscribers, which blows away our expectations.
Yeah.
And we're just really grateful that people are this interested in, Greek mythology and classic literature and epic poetry, and listening to us talk.
If you have enjoyed listening to us talk about the Iliad and the Odyssey, but you might be wondering to yourself, what else do these people read when they're not reading the Iliad and the Odyssey? Well, we have started a Patreon where we are going to be doing a mini podcast just every other week. Mini podcasts, not every week, every other week. And we're going to talk about all the other things that we read when we're not reading the Iliad and Odyssey. I want to make sure that we're committed to keeping the content that we deem sort of educational. Yeah, not behind a paywall. All the things we've been doing so far on Winnow, talking about the Iliad and the Odyssey, talking about other texts like we did with Frankenstein, whenever they sort of pop up and become culturally relevant.
Talking about the Odyssey movie, we'll keep, trailer reactions and things like that.
Yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah.
That stuff I consider educational, but also it's entertainment, but it's educational entertainment. The stuff that we're going to put on Patreon will always just be us gabbing more about books. And it's going to be more of like the after show, the hangout. It's just a good opportunity for me to talk about whatever I'm currently obsessed with.
Yeah. We'll have the link to the Patreon down below. Again, there's no absolute requirement to support us. Just liking and subscribing and commenting is really helpful in and of itself. And the next content that we come out with will be directly about the Odyssey.
Keep your eyes peeled for our first Odyssey content. We're going to do another Homer translation recommendation video episode.
There is no audiobook for me to pitch right now, which is weird. I usually have been pitching that.
Oh, yeah.
We'll have an audiobook of the Odyssey out at least a week before the first episode there comes out, so you can follow along there.
Yeah. It's not out yet, but it will be. So keep your eyes peeled for that as well. And until then,
happy reading.
Happy reading.